Hey everyone, I welcome you all back to the My Hero Academia Season 5 reviews. We're now on episode 2, and it seems we're going to finally be able to jump right into where we left off in Season 4, and at the very end of last week's episode. Speaking of last week's episode, let me just give you all a quick recap. Basically, it was filler of the reintroduced Class 1A and all of their quirks variety. Some notable moments were the big three playing villains, as well as a damsel in distress, Kaminari, driving a freaking car, and the biggest moment of all was seeing Dabi and Hawks seemingly work together. With that recap out of the way, let's begin. Right off the bat, we've hopped right into Endeavor's flashback of the events after taking down the high-end Nomu. Dabi approaches both he and Hawks and pulls a Johnny Cash on the two of them. Endeavor brings up the fact that Dabi murdered Snatch, the pro that attempted to stop the League from getting to Overhaul at the end of the Shia Hasakai arc. Hope I pronounced that right. Dabi doesn't seem to recall the hero's name, as he is more interested in having a chat with the number one hero. Hawks attempts to make a stand against Dabi, who mocks him, saying there's no way he'd stand a chance against the top two heroes who are covered in wounds. Just as Dabi attacks the pair, the number 5 hero, Mirko, comes through with a powerful kick and a promise of kicking his butt. Realizing he's met his match, Dabi calls out to Ujiko, and is suddenly surrounded by teleporting goo that All For One used during his fight with All Might, making his escape. As he vanishes, he shows his disappointment in not being able to chat with the top hero, so he tells him to do his best and to not die. It's very interesting though, as he calls him by his full name in his last moments before he fully vanishes, thwarting Mirko's attacks. Cue the intro. We're immediately thrown back in the Dabi and Hawks' encounter. Hawks is pretty pissed off at Dabi, as it seems he didn't stick to their original plan. Apparently, the encounter was supposed to be a day later, and in a different location, as well as the fact that the Nomu they fought was on a completely different level than any of the ones he had seen before. Dabi retorts back at him, though as he mentions that he just wanted a random strong guy, and that Hawks had messed up by bringing him the number one hero. Hawks argues with Dabi, claiming that he thought that he'd be happy dealing a lot of damage to the number one hero, and that he's still the one that went back on his word. However, Dabi makes a pretty fair point in saying that it's unreasonable for him to just suddenly trust the number 2 hero. I mean, he's apparently recruiting for the League. He'd have to be insane to not vet a hero that wants to work with them, especially being the number 2 hero no less. Dabi goes on about how it's hard to believe that Hawks is actually behind their cause when there are no casualties in battle. Hawks isn't having that, as he tells him that he needs the public to trust him as much as possible, as that will lead him to getting better information, and that he needs to start seeing the long term. Just salient points among two conspirators. In the end, Dabi tells Hawks that regardless, he still can't let him meet the boss just yet, and that he'd be in touch. All of this is just unreal. The number 2 hero is a big-time League sympathizer? All that charming personality, and it's wasted on a no-good, double-crossing bird-brain jerk? Well, no. That's immediately followed by a flashback to Hawks discussing with the Hero Public Safety Commission about being a double agent and infiltrating the League. The Commission admits they completely underestimated the League's power at Kamino because of their lack of information. So what better way to correct that than to get a hero on the inside? I mean, that's just a classic way of doing things. Hawks obviously doesn't seem super comfortable just ignoring the awful things the League does. But it's pointed out that they're asking him specifically because they believe he's the only one that can ignore it. That man was clearly correct in his assessment, as Hawks approaches the hospitalized Endeavor with a big grin on his face, apologizing to him within his mind. The scene cuts over to Dabi starting out into the distance, and suddenly remembering Snatch. He remembers his final words to him. Have you ever thought about the feeling of those they left behind? Referring to Dabi's victims. He then cries blood, saying that he thinks about it so much that he's gone insane. You know, of all the villains, Dabi does seem to be the most interesting one of them all. He clearly has some sort of big goal that's, at the very least, tied to Stain's ideology. We all know Shigaraki just wants to take advantage of the people that Stain inspired, regardless of if they actually are staying true to his will. But Dabi seems to be sticking to those convictions through and through. I definitely look forward to seeing more of Dabi, as I think he's going to be more than just a mere pawn for the new symbol of fear. Back to the episode, 2 days have passed, and Endeavor is finally released from the hospital. He still has his left eye thankfully, but now sports a nasty and gigantic scar. As they idly chit-chat, Endeavor ponders if it was just mere coincidence that they were directly attacked by this Nomu the day that they arrived. I mean, sure, we know it wasn't, but Hawks does a good job covering up by pointing out that any villain would see it as a golden opportunity to try and take the top heroes out at the same time. And honestly, that was extremely close to happening. So that definitely made his cover more convincing in this moment. As Hawks sees Endeavor off, we get another flashback to his discussion with the Safety Commission. He questions if his infiltration is necessary, with one of the members referring to it merely as a proposition. Hawks scoffs at that, being their term of choice, as he really has no say in the matter. We're then greeted to some Inception as we get a flashback within a flashback of Hawks, apparently saving a bunch of people when he was a child. Which makes sense as he did break records when he made his way into the top 10 in such a short amount of time. I'm sure we'll get something more notable out of that in the future, but at least we can all fawn over how adorable Hawks is with his Endeavor doll. Hawks accepts the mission given to him, even if somewhat reluctantly, in the hopes that it will lead him to his ideal future. A world where heroes have too much time on their hands. Endeavor arrives at the Todoroki complex, much to Fuyumi's delight, as she wants to celebrate a job well done with her family. Todoroki points out the bad scar Endeavor has, which is pretty funny in all honesty. Like father, like son, right? Awkwardness ensues, and Natsuo decides it's something that he can't do after all. He's angry that he just found out that Shoto likes soba, as he was never allowed near the failures that live in a different world than him. No matter what face Endeavor has shown to the public, his son still sees him as the crazy father that neglected his family. He mentions something happening to their big brother Toya, who is clearly absent during this little family reunion. The brief flashback shows the three other siblings playing, with Toya being the red-haired child. That's all we get about that. But now it does beg the question, where is this fourth child? Clearly we're getting some plot set up here. Carrying onwards, Natsuo storms out in disgust. Fuyumi cries about the reunion being a bust. All the while, a TV plays in the background of the public's mixed reactions to Endeavor's big save. Shoto comments on how the hero Endeavor was pretty amazing, but that he agreed with his brother's sentiment. He is unable to forgive him for what he's done to their family. But at the very least, he's willing to see where he goes as a father from here on out, as he knows even small things can change a person dramatically for the better. Right, Midoriya? Endeavor reflects on what it means to be strong, with his simplest answer, being strong enough to ensure the next generation's future. Now, we're getting into the Midoriya half of the story. Season 4 left us with Deku in this strange, scratchy world surrounded by the previous One For All users. And now, we're finally getting to see more of it. We continue with All For One attempting to get his brother, the first user, to submit to his will. All For One showcases just how exactly he makes people become so loyal to him. He takes power away from those that don't want them, and gives them away to the people that do. In return, they pledge their loyalty to him should he ever call on them for help. The first user clearly rejects the idea that he's helping these people out of the goodness of his heart. But in classic All For One fashion, he twists his words and talks to his brother as if he's the true narcissist, trying to take away the happiness of the people he has helped. The recreated memory continues to show us exactly how All For One rose to power, and then finally seeing him force his will upon his brother. As he talks about how people just do things for him without even needing to ask, he references that it all plays out exactly like the comic book the two of them used to read. However, the first user points out that they only read the first 3 volumes, and that in the end, the hero of justice triumphed over the demon lord, stating that the bad guy always loses in the end. He then transfers the stockpiling quirk to his younger brother, causing all the reenactment to close out. Once again, he recognizes Deku as the 9th holder of One For All, and says that he wanted to show him much more, but that he was only at 20%. He tells young Midoriya to stay safe, but that he ultimately does not have to worry as he is not alone. The scene then plays out as it did at the end of Season 4, with Deku waking up to a destroyed bedroom. Overall, that was a pretty solid episode. We were rewarded with some much needed answers of the whole Hawks situation that left us on the edge of our seats last week, with just a tad bit more story on Deku's side of things. Although, there's still a lot of questions there. All For One and the first user kept referring to quirks as meta powers, which harkens back to the Flasher that Hawks took out last season, who talked of metahuman liberation. These to me just seem to be archaic terms from a long time ago. The first also refers to them being way past the singularity, which probably has something to do with the fact that he can directly talk to Deku. At the very least, we'll probably get some sort of insight on this in the next episode, as the preview shows Deku chatting up All Might about One For All. but the majority of the focus next episode will definitely be on Class 1A and 1B as they begin to fight it out alongside a special guest. Gee, I wonder who it could be. I guess we'll just have to wait until next week to find out. Anyhow, what'd y'all think of this episode? Was it a solid return to form for the show, or were you just happy to finally be done with Endeavor and Hawk stuff? Definitely let me know in the comments below. With that said, I'm gonna head out. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all again next week when I review episode 3.